When we talk about these relationships between Rama and the cartels, it's sort of an open secret, right? If your senior officials are meeting financiers on the part of the Sinaloa cartel quite openly, it shows you're not particularly concerned about who might know about that. And so there's an obvious recognition, I think, on Rama's part that the Biden administration is aware of and willing to tolerate this. For some reason, we turn a blind eye to it. And again, it draws in stark contrast the treatment of Mr. Berisha.
The United States government has negotiated with the literal terrorists in the Taliban, allied with communists in the East Bloc, and continues to work with dictators, accused war criminals, and adversaries who threaten us with nuclear destruction. And it's for good reason that the leader of the free world sets an extraordinarily high bar for when to disqualify a political leader from private discussion and declare them persona non grata. It is this inconsistency, the one that saw Biden embrace Rama as he presided over Albania's dominance over Europe's drug trade, while declaring total war on Berisha over unnamed and unproven offenses. This inconsistency that raises the question of why. Why would Biden, Blinken, and Yuri Kim contort diplomatic standards so flagrantly, with the effective result of eliminating Albania's democratic opposition and propping up the Socialist Party for a second decade in power?
Berisha is much less corrupt than the socialists who've been running the country since 2013. It's frankly outrageous the U.S. government has gone to bat for the Rama regime at this point in their persecution of their domestic political enemies.
The fundamental problem, I would say, is was that level of corruption so extraordinary as to demand this essentially whole of government effort by the Biden administration to make Mr. Berisha a persona non grata? And I think it's very hard to understand why, in this particular circumstances, so much effort was taken against Mr. Berisha in what seems to be a political vendetta by the Biden administration.
Lawfare is an insidious thing that happens in a lot of countries, and unfortunately we've seen it happen in the U.S. in recent years, where the Democrats tried to get rid of Donald Trump through inventive prosecutions. And this has happened on an even bigger extent in Albania. What's really insidious is the Biden administration has played along with this and has allowed, in essence, one of the two big parties in Albania to be pushed largely out of political life.
As Donald Trump directs his State Department to radically reconsider how we spend money abroad, the White House would be wise to question what we've gotten for the tens of millions of dollars we spend in Albania each year. And it's not as though we've helped prop up an autocrat who's a better ally to America than Berisha or the Democrats.
One of the things that'll be interesting to see is whether the incoming Trump administration takes a similar line to the Biden administration, which seems improbable for all of the aforementioned reasons in terms of the Rama's government's relationship with narco trafficking.
Everything we do must be justified by the answer to one of three questions. Does it make us stronger? Does it make us safer? And does it make us more prosperous? If it doesn't do one of those three things, we will not do it.
One of the things we could see is removal of the persona non grata status. Certainly you would want to see and expect to see, I think, a greater sense of fairness, that regardless of corruption allegations against Mr. Berisha, if you are talking about the conservative political movement in Albania being treated as something the United States government won't deal with, but then a socialist narco-trafficking government being the only government worth dealing with, that doesn't seem like a sustainable pathway and something that the Trump administration would find any real rationale to continue.
The central contention of American critics of Biden's record here, and even Sali Berisha's core contention, is not that Sali Berisha is a perfect politician, or that the states ought to throw their weight behind him and against Rama and the socialists. Rather, Berisha is asking the U.S. to simply reverse the designation levied against him, and he is decrying a lack of due process.
This is a European country that is a NATO member that we are pledged to defend per Article 5 of NATO. We also should care because this shows that the Soros people have in many ways completely transformed an entire country to their liking. And if they can do this to Albania, they can do it elsewhere.
One reason we might see sort of action from Trump here is that the way in which the Biden administration has essentially treated Albania, treated Mr. Rama versus Mr. Berisha, would suggest a double standards and an effort to weaponize the judiciary and to put favored political interests on a pedestal and unfavored ones essentially in the gulag.
The Biden administration may have been voted out of office, but the students of Blinken and Soros' Open Society Foundation still staff the State Department at the highest levels. Yuri Kim has failed upwards, still working as our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs. How many other Soros acolytes are laying in wait within the federal government, ready to replicate the exact blueprint that Biden was able to use in Albania to corrode democracy and embolden socialists?
Do I think the Soros people are going to do it to America tomorrow? No, but this shows them a model that works. I mean, the Soros people bring money, they bring influence with our Democratic Party.
The Presidential Medal of Freedom is awarded to George Soros. His inspiring generosity reminds us all of our capacity and our obligation to stand up to the abuse of power and to be guardians of democracy and all people yearning to be free.
This should worry everyone.
Albanians can and should vet their politicians, just as we Americans appraise ours. But just as weaponized lawfare should not have tried to disenfranchise the 77 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump and used trumped-up criminal charges to do it, Albanians should have the right to see the democratic process through without Soros-funded prosecutors making their decisions for them. I'm Tiana Laudescher for the Washington Examiner.